Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for a brand new episode of Skylanders Imaginators Versus here on the channel. We're going to be kicking off this episode back to the traditional stance where the timer begins the immediate moment of the Skylanders summoning, so naturally that gives chain reaction an immediate disadvantage given how much longer his animations are compared to that of Dr. Crankcase, and we're starting off this episode with the two tech characters because we're tackling the Golden Arcade after a massive critique of Fizzland occurred in the previous episode. So naturally, with us heading out for the Golden Arcade, the tech characters are going to be placed in Portal first because their element pops up first for that very same corresponding level. Now already Dr. Crankcase is speaking with Baron von Shellshock, so the villains are off to an immediate advantage when it comes to the speedrun objectives. Very important for them to maintain the speed and momentum they have over the senseis at the moment, because in the previous episode not only did we critique Fizzland, but the senseis also went out of their way to complete unnecessary tasks for the level's completion, and so naturally they lost a bunch of time compared to the villains through that foolish endeavour of theirs. But you know, for the villains this time around, continuing with the smarts as Airstrike does a double take on these stones right now, but now the villains have left themselves in a rather precarious situation because Pit Boss can take their final stone no matter what, leading to a loss, which means that all of that momentum and all of that time the villains have gained has now been thrown away at the start of a very easy creation clash game. The senseis have proven that with a victory 6-3. So this is not a good start for the villains, and this is exactly what the senseis were hoping for, as they try to recuperate all of that lost time based on their failures at Fizzland, mind you. They're exiting the card track now, and whilst we wait for not only for Creation Clash to be victorious on behalf of the villains, but we also need to wait on loan screens and cutscenes. So I want to obviously acknowledge the fact that this is coming out on a Saturday rather than a Tuesday. Life has really gotten in the way this past week, but we are here uploading this episode right after my live stream for the previous episode of Telltale's Walking Dead, mind you, a stream which was delayed, much like how this video coming out was delayed. But the second thing I wanted to talk about was how I would make an improvement upon this series. Going back, there is one thing I would change, and that would be the villain cast. I would also make the UI a little bit less clustered perhaps, but as it stands at the moment, I do think this has been a fine series, one that's been really fun to record, even if it does mean tackling the same level twice in a row. That it was the same case here with the Golden Temple, or the Golden Arcade even. I don't know where I got words temple from. That's the level for the next episode, so we'll be worrying about that in a future episode. But enough of absolutely peeking the mic. I also wanted to talk about villain cast in the fact that the senseis are a rather peculiar bunch, because I wanted a varied lot that I don't usually utilise, because I've done sensei locks on my channel before, but this is a very different cast compared to what I've used before. I've also done villain locks on the channel before, and so I think what would have made this particular villain cast a lot more unique, just like the Sensei cast, is if we had Chaos in place of Hoodsicle, so Chaos representing the dark elements. And then, now the Senseis aren't the only one with a mismatch, disadvantage, you could go as far to say. I was almost about to say misadvantage then, which I'm not certain is a word. Now already Chain Reaction is beating up the bad Bouncer. This is what Bouncer looks like as a villain rather than a heroic giant, mind you. Very interesting design for a enemy, not a particularly creative, well, it's creative, but it's also lazy as it feels familiar. But getting back on task here, if Chaos was representing the dark element, it would mean that he wouldn't get the elemental buff, similar to how Tritub doesn't get the light elemental buff. So now at least there'll be one representative of either cast that both don't get the elemental buff. That would have really even things out a little bit on the playing field. And then not to mention, the final Chaos boss fight is where the Sentinel Doomlanders are brought out. You know, you fight for Sentinel Doomlander for the first time alongside Chaos as he brings out a plethora of all of his different Doomlanders. So naturally, tackling that fight will be Barbella on behalf of the Sensei, so long as she makes it that far. She has done in the past when I've done Sensei locks in the past, as I was alluding to earlier. Chain Reaction is already shooting down balloons, whereas the villains, as you can tell, have that 2-second deficit. They've only just defeated the bad Bouncer. But as I continue with my ramblings on about these casts, when it comes to Chaos, he would be fighting himself because he would be the Sentinel representative, replacing Hoodsicle, so he'd be the Dark Element as well as the person fighting himself for the Sentinel Doomlander, because as we already know, we must fight a Doomlander with the Skanda of the corresponding battle class. So in the Sensei's case, that will be Barbella. In the villain's case even, that's going to be Hoodsicle, again, so long as he survives that far. I have no doubt he shall, though, given how overpowered that character is. But even then, Chaos replacing Hoodsicle on the cast would have meant that Chaos would have been fighting himself. He would have been a Sentinel representative as well as a Dark representative, so sure, he wouldn't have got any of those buffs. But then, the villain cast would know a bit like what it feels like to be Legendary Tri-Tip and not get the light buff when he's in light elemental zones, and that's going to be particularly tough for the Abandoned Amusement Park, because we all know the light section that takes place in that level. It is going to be a literal nightmare. We're just looking at with one difficulty down, because that section on Nightmare really does define Skylanders Imaginators Nightmare mode. It's arguably the hardest fight in the game. I would personally make the case that it is the hardest part of the game, besides for the Quickshot Doomlander, which concludes that their level. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself. It's quite clear at this point that I'm hyping up for the rest of the series, because the gameplay has been finished. I've just taken a while to get around to the post-commentary of this particular episode, which is why it's coming out here on Saturday after the Telltale Walking Dead stream, rather than it coming out on the originally proposed Tuesday release date. But that being said, for Creation Clasher, I wonder how many brain cells it took to come up with that name, but he has been defeated by none other than a chain reaction, whilst the villains are barely on their second stone placement. But Crash Bandicoot at the bottom middle right there is the best possible position for him, given that he has the best defense there with 2 blades on all of his sides. Tycoon Crow, that was a very foolish placement, because now no matter what stone we play, we will take it. So the villains have won 6-3, the same ratio that the Senseis had upon Baron von Shell Shock, but the Senseis are just doing better with these Creation Clash games, because they defeated Creation Clasher with a better ratio as well. And they even completed the Snail Challenge already, so Dr. Crankcase just needs to take his time completing that Snail Challenge. We've got to make sure that even though we aren't going for collectibles in this level, it's useless going for collectibles or even all areas found, because there's an area locked behind a glider wing, which obviously you don't unlock until the end of Dragon Temple, a level I almost name-dropped earlier by accident. Apparently we've got the Golden Temple, which I think might be a supercharger track actually. I can't remember the name of it specifically. That came with the Sea Racing Trophy. But we're going to be completing Snail Challenges, and we're still going to be completing Troll Radios, not for the sake of the collectibles bonus, but because it adds a chest to the vault. You can see that on the villain's perspective now. The chest haven't been added to the vault. It's the same reason why we do the Egg Rescue mini-games here in the noob testing, where Dr. Crankcase, all of that time spent heading toward the egg rescue machine, has been wasted, because Sal just really had to interject right there, and now already Chain Reaction is shooting targets to lower platforms, whilst the egg rescue game is being tackled, and it's being purely tackled for the sake of the Imaginite chest. There is literally no reason to tackle it. It's not for a collectibles bonus. It doesn't add any of the areas found. The point is, in this level, it's long enough, and I guarantee that Skylanders are going to die, and all areas cannot be found anyway, so going for all 3-star objectives would just be an absolute waste of time. Both of these casts are better off just trying to blaze through this level as quickly as possible in order to minimize their time, as I shall say. The villains have already lost enough time, so the last thing they need to do is going out of their way for the sake of collectibles. And the villains are playing through this the first time. You can tell that Chain Reaction's lines are a little bit more refined, and he's even using his combo ability, which I completely forgot about until recording their portion of this episode. I forgot that he could dash forward and gain that sudden burst of speed. That would have been particularly useful in Chain Reaction's previous appearances, mind you. Chain Reaction almost messed up that grind challenge there, and that's one thing he cannot do, because for Senseis, they really need all of these Imaginite chests they can get, especially now that they've caught back up to villains with the utilization of the additional level star completion in Sky Fortress, as well as the Swashbuckler Shrine in Chapter 6, Fizzland. So, literally, the only disadvantage for Sensei's right at the moment is the timer. If they can blaze through the next few levels and maintain the strong cast that they currently have, then the Senseis might even be in league to win this thing, which was not something I was suspecting going into this series. I thought the villains were going to absolutely run away with it, with the Sensei's only advantage being the speedrun objective, but so far, that's not turning out to be true, but that's because in Fizzland, they have a disadvantage going first, and me, whilst recording their section, not knowing that you didn't need to do stuff that I did, and then the villains went through and didn't do all that stuff and garnered the time advantage as a result. This time the villains are going through it first, they're taking less efficient lines and they're losing creation clash games. That's just the lack of preparedness on the villains' behalf, but now the Senseis get to switch out for Legendary Tri-Tip, and if Legendary Tri-Tip by some miracle gets through this section completely unscathed, then he gets to play through the rest of the level from here on out, because he is also the Smash representative of Senseis, as well as the Light representative, so that means he will be fighting the Smasher Doomlander, but unfortunately, Smasher Doomlanders and Fire Spellpunks in 2D are not a good mix for our characters here. But speaking of light characters, we get to switch out for Blastatron on behalf of the villain cast right after Sal's cutscene, and Boom Bloom is getting buffed up by the ninja spot in the middle there. We're not going to bother with the Sensei Shrine here, the Bazooka Shrine, especially since these characters literally only just switched out, so switching back again would feel like such a waste, and again, these characters really want to keep that timer to a minimum, and doing switch outs is a good 10-second time waste. Why do you think in speedruns people very irregularly swap Skylanders, if they even swap Skylanders at all? So here goes the villains. So far, it doesn't seem so their game is being as efficient as the Sensei's, but it doesn't matter how efficient your game is. What matters is that you win in the end. It doesn't matter if you win by one stone or by several. Winning is still winning. So there we go, we're going to put Paynyard in the bottom right hand corner. Let's see if he can survive a Smasher Doomlander, because he's definitely potentially on the chopping block for this episode if he fails the Smasher Doomlander, which is a task almost always guaranteed, it feels like. The Smasher Doomlander is a really tough fight, I cannot emphasize this enough. A 2D plane with fire spellbooks is not a good mix. Luckily, this Doomlander isn't as hard as the Quickshot, so I suppose how well our characters do here will be an indication of what's to come. But at least with the Quickshot Doomlander fight, I can fight against them as Quickshot Skylanders, those representatives being Tidepool and Dr. Crankcase, and those characters have range. Tri-Tip and Paynyada have to get up close and personal. Plus, they have really big and bulky hitboxes. They are designed to be easily hit, which is why they have larger health bars. Now, Blastatron is finally completing the puzzle on the bottom level here, whilst Tri-Tip is already grabbing the TNT crate. He is absolutely blazing through this level despite his lack of speed. Blastatron is slowly but surely catching up with a much quicker movement speed, I shall say, even with this along the way. I have no idea where that came from. I suppose I was just impersonating Pit Boss for no good reason whatsoever. But here goes Tri-Tip with over 1,100 health. When I said earlier that he is a tank that is designed to take hits, this is what I meant. And he baseball swings and knocks the enemy out of the park. And by out of the park, I mean out of existence entirely, because that enemy is dead. But enough of emphasizing the whole dead part of that dead enemy here. Tri-Tip is almost at the next combat section already, grabbing that experience orb that he doesn't even need. He's at level 20, that's just kind of a flex right now. Meanwhile, Blastatron is now only just picking up the TNT for himself. He has a lot of catching up to do, even though, like I said earlier, this is actually a massive catch-up on behalf of the villains. Blastatron is getting through this a lot more quickly than what Tri-Tip was earlier. But now here comes Tri-Tip charging into combat, quite literally too, but luckily he hits hard. These enemies are being defeated very, very quickly. At the end of the day, Blastatron certainly is more efficient in combat. He avoids attacks a whole lot more easily, but he doesn't stack damage as quickly as Tri-Tip does, it seems. Tri-Tip is very good at defeating enemies quickly, but it does usually come at the expense of his own health, because he has to kind of tank those hits in order to continue with a damage in momentum. So Tri-Tip is clearly doing very well defeating these enemies very, very quickly, but Blastatron will play things probably more strategically and therefore lose all of the time he has been gaining on Tri-Tip. But now let's continue smashing and bashing. I love the animation that legendary Tri-Tip goes through with his front flip. You can imagine how brutal that mace would be taken to the face if you're being smashed by a front flipping Triceratops. That's definitely not something that I would want to be on the receiving end of. There goes Blastatron, and exactly as suspected, Blastatron is defeating these enemies with ease. He's not getting hit whatsoever besides that bad bouncer. But you know what? That was an intentional hit. That was all part of a plan. If he didn't get hit right there, then the villains would be doomed. They'd be screwed. They'd lose all of their remaining survivors to the Smash Doomlander. Trust me, that hit was necessary. That being said, he's eventually gotten rid of that bad bounce and picked up some food, and now we have even more enemies for him to defeat. I suppose I might have to take back what I said earlier. Blastatron is getting through these enemies very, very quickly, stacking damage very, very quickly. It's almost, if not the exact same as Tri-Tip's time defeating all those enemies, but Blastatron cannot be the same exact time. He needs to be quicker, given that they have a disadvantage from losing that Creation Clash game at the start of the level. So now the Senseis are several seconds ahead. Not the 6 seconds they have to catch up though, so they still have work to do in future episodes if they want that timer objective. But here comes Tri-Tip. Let's see if he can get through the Smash fight unscathed. Luckily for Smash Doomlander, on the first few phases is very incredibly easy to dodge so long as you jump over his attack, so his attack is directioned away from you. Because luckily, unlike stupid rat hitboxes, the Smash Doomlander does not hit you before the hit lands, and jumping over top of him, where the hitbox is nowhere near you, also results in you not being hit. It's not like the rats, where they hit you from the other side of a stage, and then before their attack and animation even finishes, you've been dealt damage to. Luckily for Tri-Tip, that is not the situation. And Tri-Tip stacking damage, like I said earlier, he is an absolute unit when it comes to dealing damage very, very quickly, because he has his geysers in the ground, spewing rocks, and then they're dealing damage whilst he continues with either his melee combo or his baseball swing, which deals 3 times as much damage as his regular swings does. But then with his front flip, he's also dealing 300 damage. As you can tell, it stacks up very, very quickly, and already the Smash Doomlander, what's the Smoosher Doomlander? But the Smash Doomlander on behalf of the Senseis is already at half health. Tri-Tip went into this with such a huge disadvantage though. Painada, as you can tell, is clearly at full health because he's just been spawned in for the first time, but he's not actually doing this as quickly as Tri-Tip, it feels like. But he does have a powerful slot charged up, so now he's going to destroy all of that and apparently deal no damage whatsoever. The hitboxes for Painada are really drank, which is why it's no wonder that he's not even on the next phase yet. Meanwhile, Tri-Tip now has to deal with fire spellpunks in 2D. Best of luck to Tri-Tip, for he is going to need it. Luckily though, if he plays this safe, even with only 600 health remaining, he could be dealing some good bulk of damage here. The more damage that's dealt to the Doomlander, the better, because then obviously whatever Sensei I switch out for next, they can deal with less health and get the Smash Doomlander off screen sooner, and then they can go into the Battle Gong, hopefully with more health, because you must remember that even if Tri-Tip does make it through to Smash Doomlander fight, he's not going to be out of the woods after that, because he still has a Battle Gong to have to deal with, and that is something, a task, shall you say, easier said than done. He's going to charge straight for him. We're going to class that as a miss input, but what does it matter, because I was not expecting that. I even peaked the microphone with my reaction, because Tri-Tip, against all odds, whilst Painada is only now entering the second phase of the Smash Doomlander fight, Tri-Tip has single-handedly took down the Smash Doomlander and those pesky fire spellpunks. That is revenge for every single time I've been defeated by a fire spellpunk in any sort of series, whether it's an Imaginators Soul Seeker series or a Locke series. It doesn't matter. That is my revenge, and it is sweet and glorious. Legendary Tri-Tip. Now he just needs to get through Battle Gong, and after having single-handedly got through with Smash Doomlander with almost as much health as he went into it, I have faith in his character, especially since there's a nice chunk of popcorn at the end there, but he's going to charge away from it. Bit too eager to get into combat now. Let's hope that doesn't cost him, but he's grabbed the popcorn. He's at 530 health, but Painada has been defeated. That is rough. Painada went into this fight with so much more of an advantage than Tri-Tip, but he wasn't able to stick it out. So we're going to switch to Tri-Conqueror instead, because if there's any way of defeating fire spellpunks in 2D, it's with a fire ninja of your own. Fight fire with fire and all that. So already, Tycoon Crow has taken down the Smash Doomlander far more efficiently than what Pinata could ever dream of. And plus, Tycoon Crow really did prove himself in the previous episode, so it's only right to use him again here. But Tri-Tip has to be very careful of that bad bouncer. If he takes a hit from his charge, then he will be defeated, which is probably why he aborted his own charge right there. He wants to make sure he has the space and momentum in order to move out of the way of that bad bouncer where it's necessary. And his baseball swing isn't quite the final defeated move I bet Tri-Tip hoped it would be, but now he's just got to be very cautious, especially since the bad bouncer was temporarily off screen for a moment there, but that combo did him in, and just like that, legendary Tri-Tip has clutched out the entirety of the second half of this level. The villains have had 2 losses already, whereas the Senseis stacked up have not had a single loss as of just yet. They have an advantage in every area except for the speedrun objective. So we're going to see how Dragon Temple in the next episode really riles it up. But for now, we need to wait things out. Tycoon Crow has to finish defeating this Doomlander. Then he still needs to get through the Battle Gong, and he's already down to 300 health. There's a problem, Tycoon Crow, for you. The character is really overpowered, but only 600 health to boot is not nearly enough for the high difficulties where some enemies are going to deal that much damage in a single hit. But none of that matters because Tycoon Crow has defeated the Doomlander, just as Tri-Tip is taking out all of the locks on the vault over here. He's not missed a single lock, it seems like. That would be a true statement right there. So he has maximized his time in opening up that vault. He hasn't wasted any time. He has been a tried and true MVP throughout this series. I would even say that his single-handed clutch of the Smash Doomlander is one of the greatest moments of this series thus far, right in line with Airstrike's legendary platforming skills in level 1. You never know, those couple of seconds Airstrike saved could be the difference between the Senseis winning or losing at speedrun objective. But speaking of winning and losing, we got to hope that Tycoon Crow does not lose this Battle Gong, because the last thing the villains need is another loss. They're already down 8 to 10. So in the next episode, they have to work really hard to even it out. And Dragon Temple is a pain because there's a magic elemental zone. So Pinata would usually have a large portion of level to tackle. Or Bad Juju, because the air and magic elements pop up before the Doomlander. The Doomlander is the boasting of Doomlander. But you know what pops up before air or magic? Undead. That basically means that when that undead section pops up, Wolfgang needs to single-handedly clutch out the entire level from that point forward. Wolfgang has one hell of a difficult odyssey ahead of him, so we'll see how that shapes out. But for now, Tycoon Crow is finally bested for Battle Gong, I should go as far to saying. He's acquiring his Imaginite chest, very useful, because we got to make sure that those counters are kept on top of. So now, here goes the Senseis opening up from the Villain Vault, whereas Tycoon Crow still needs to go through and break all those locks just yet. Again, it's not a 6-second deficit, but it's definitely a victory the Sensei shall cherish. They really needed this victory over the villains, and might I say that the villains, they very rarely fail, but when they do fail, they fail spectacularly. So far, the only bad episodes they've had are episode 4 and episode 7. They're the only ones where they've been at a deficit compared to Senseis, as well as episode 1, because so much of that was Graveclobber slowly trekking through the level, and Graveclobber compared to speed of Airstrike is no comparison. So apart from the very first episode, episode 4 and episode 7, where the only cases of the villains failing spectacularly, boy, they did not just fail, they did so in spectacular fashion. So let's just hope the villains don't fail again, and if they do fail, let's hope they don't fail to this kind of scale. But the Senseis have already paused their timer at 2 hours and 36 minutes? Yes, that would be right. 2 hours, 36 minutes, and 37 seconds. So luckily the villains, like I say, by the time they're done with this cutscene and opening up for Imaginite Vault, all of that good stuff, yada yada yada, by the time all that's said and done with, I guarantee it won't be a 6-second loss. But they still bring themselves ever so closer to that Sensei timer, and that's the last thing they want to do. They don't want to lose Creation Clash games in the future. They don't want to lose more fighters in the future. So as you can see, the villains would have got no lives lost, and they failed all areas found. If the Senseis could have accessed that area from the glider, then they would have got another objective and then there would have been an Imaginite chest ahead of Ability Curse, far to say. Now, the objective is to travel on Sharkfin's boat, but Tycoon Quo isn't going to be doing that just yet now, is he? So let's pop open the Imaginite Vault, because these villains have these Imaginite chests to get through, and then, and only then, will they be ready to stop their timer and conclude the episode where it stands. On even playing field, except for the villains having a smaller cast, but also a lower timer. So this truly is anybody's game. This Versus is shaping up to be rather interesting, and might I say rather exciting. Legendary Tri-Tip single-handedly clutching out for Smash and Doomlander. That was one thing I was not expecting. That is tough, and yet Tri-Tip got on ahead and did it anyway. He didn't care about what we thought was possible. But that being said, the villain's timer is coming to an end now that the villain vault was said and done with, so that means this episode is also coming to an end. I cannot, in good conscience, end off this video without first thanking all of my incredible channel members whose continued support help make these videos possible. Without them, these videos would be near impossible to make, so from the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate every last one of them. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, there are plenty of options on screen now to explore, and please consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. On that note, this video is coming to an end, so thank you so much as always for watching. Until the next video arises, peace!